Good evening. My name is Brian Conway. I'm the director of the State Historic Preservation Office, which is an agency within the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. Our office is responsible for the symposium that you're all part of, Michigan Modern Design That Shaped America, as well as the exhibition that we're going to see after our talk this evening. So we're very pleased to be here at the Grand Rapids Art Museum to have this wonderful talk tonight. Many of you were on the tour this afternoon. Many of you will be joining us for the symposium. Let's see, what day is today? Friday and Saturday. And look forward to meeting all of you. I'd like to just take a few minutes to introduce you to some of the key people that helped organize this. Amy Arnold. Amy, are you here somewhere? Will you stand up for a minute? Amy Arnold is our staff person within the State Historic Preservation Office that really has been the lead on this project. We worked together to really try to tell the story of Michigan's very important role in the development of modernism. When we first thought of this, we realized that there really was a story here that heretofore we didn't feel was well understood in academia, or certainly by our citizens of Michigan and those across the country. So we thought it was real important to get this story out, and I think we've uncovered quite a remarkable story which we'll hear about the next couple of days. This is the second of a symposium that we've held. We held a similar symposium with different topics last year at Cranbrook, and the exhibition actually was introduced at Cranbrook last year and was extremely successful. We're very pleased to have a partnership with the Grand Rapids Art Museum, and the exhibition has been slightly reworked with some additions. I think it's actually improved, so I give a lot of credit to those involved here at the Grand Rapids Art Museum. But before I get back to the Graham, I'd also like to introduce Catherine Kirby. Catherine, would you please stand up? Catherine is the orchestrator for the symposium. Without her, we would not be on buses or have lunches or any of that good stuff, so she's done a tremendous job. I also want to recognize Jessica Puff, who unfortunately is not here. She's left the state, has a job out of state, but she was very instrumental in working with the Graham as well as working with Cranbrook on identifying objects, et cetera, for the exhibition. I'd also like to recognize the Michigan Historic Preservation Network as the sponsor of tonight's event. Thanks to them, we have the lovely food and drinks out front, and they will be there after the talk. So Janet Krieger in the back is one of the major funders, together with Nancy Finegood, the director of the Historic Preservation Network. I mentioned that the exhibition, or the symposium I should mention, has been a partnership with the Kendall College of Art and Design. So those of you who are not around today, tomorrow, you'll get to know the folks at Kendall, as most of our activities will be occurring over there. But the exhibition, as it's currently mounted here in the Grand Rapids Art Museum, was a partnership between the State Historic Preservation Office and the Grand Rapids Art Museum. And I will say they're wonderful people to work with, and I feel that the exhibition has, even though it was great when it started out at Cranbrook, it's greatly improved since it's been installed here at the Grand Rapids Art Museum. So hopefully after the talk here, you'll have the opportunity to get another drink, get some food, and enjoy the exhibition. I'd like to introduce the director of the Grand Rapids Art Museum, someone who I've gained a lot of respect for, been great to work with, Dana Fries Hansen.
Well, thank you, Brian, and welcome to all of you here. It's a very exciting time for the museum. When we heard about this exhibition, we said, we've got to have it. We've got to bring it here. So this is a very special evening. The show opened about a month ago. We've had over 12,000 people come to see this exhibition already. So that's very, very exciting. I want to welcome you to the museum. How many people have been to the museum before? Okay, so that's good. A lot of you. Well, welcome to you. Welcome back. to you, and welcome to the newcomers. This institution is 104 years old, but this building, which was designed by Kulipat Yantrasast, opened in 2007, and this is the kind of exhibition that we should be doing. I've been here just short of 3 years. I'm very excited to be working here in Michigan. I got here as quickly as I could, and I've learned a lot. I'm very happy to have this wonderful partnership with the State Historic Preservation Office. We also have very good connections with people at Cranbrook, and so it's been a wonderful experience and collaboration. The museum's mission is to focus on art, design, and creativity. We provide that through diverse platforms. And so this symposium and the exhibitions and other things, we've got wonderful interactive experiences as well, are very important to build on experiences, ideas, and dialogue. And so that's part of our mission. And so community collaborations like this allow the museum to be both a cultural beacon and a civic anchor. So we welcome you who are visiting to Grand Rapids. Have a good time. Make sure that you get around to, there's this local beverage called beer, and we make a lot of it, and we're very original. That's creativity too. So anyway, I hope you enjoy the visit to the museum. I hope you get a chance to see all 3 floors and our collection, as well as the special exhibitions, which starts just outside this door and continues up on the 2nd floor. So finally, I want to thank our wonderful staff. Julie Conklin is here, I think, and Erwin Erkwitz and others, and exhibition designer Seth Alec Keller. I also thank our trustees, members, donors, and especially the sponsors for this exhibition. The presenting sponsor is Steelcase Incorporated. Contributing sponsors are Greg and Regine Betts, Shelley Padnos and Carol Sorosik, Progressive AE, Robert Daverman Architecture and Planning, LLC, Jay Visser Design, Miller Johnson, Triangle Associates, and Bill and Kate Scarborough, and we had a wonderful in-kind donation by Wausau Tile, who fabricated the fantastic sculptures by Jim Miller Melberg. So I am honored to introduce my good friend John Berry, the Director of Design West Michigan and involved with Kendall College of Art and Design, to take it from here.
Well, I too am delighted to be here, and it's wonderful to see so many here to be able to experience Todd this evening and the rest of the symposium for the next 2 days. Certainly delighted to have him here to kick off this dedicated to Michigan Modern and helping us all gain a better understanding and a shared awareness of the significant role Michigan has indeed played in the world of design. Todd is a globally recognized designer whose career spans more than 20 years. He's sort of a kid, actually. Distinguished as an innovator of accessible design, Todd is the founder of Todd Oldham Studio, a multifaceted, full-service design studio in New York. Originally a New York fashion designer and working with major fashion brands, he became the host of Todd Time on MTV's House of Style. Todd's career has evolved to include all areas of design, from interior design, film, photography, to furniture and graphic design. He worked with the Cooper Hewitt and May Ma, who is in the audience somewhere, in designing the Harlem Center. Todd is an author, that's a capital A. His 19th book is Charlie Harper's Annual Kingdom. His previous books include a 672 14-pound page monograph on the life works of artist and textile designer Alexander Girard, who worked closely with Herman Miller. Todd has also developed a unique ongoing series called Place Space that explores singular places and the uncommonly devoted people that create them. Then there's an artist monograph on the brilliant warped work of Wayne White. Most recently, he developed a collection of art supplies, kits, books, and events called Kid Made Modern, all available at Target. So please welcome Todd Oldham.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you all tonight. Hey, nice to see you again. This is a real treat for several levels. One, I happen to love Michigan very much, and because I'm here to celebrate my love of Mr. Girard, it kind of gets double-fold, because he was such an important part of not only the designscape of the entire world, but he influenced so many of the designers that are also important. So thank you for that kind introduction. As you noted, I've had the great pleasure of doing a lot of books. This was my 19th book, and it was an incredible, it was beyond labor of love. It was into some sort of possession. I felt like it was just this incredible drive that my eyes were practically rolling up in my head as I went around trying to get this book made. But I thought I knew everything about Mr. Gerard. I was a huge fan and had collected the handful of pieces I had seen through the years. But when I had the great pleasure of meeting Corey Alexander Gerard, who is Mr. Gerard's grandson, we really hit it off. And we spent about a year and a half just talking about what the possibilities would be, because like anyone who's seen Mr. Gerard's work, the family thought he deserved a beautiful, celebratory, comprehensive tribute. So after about a year and a half of talking and 3 years of the fastest book running I've ever done in my life, all over the world, literally, we came up with this incredible treasure. But all of my books have a little bit of a peculiar story. I don't know why they're like this, but every one of them has some weird trajectory that led me to this. And I'll tell you briefly this peculiar story. My mom and dad live in Abiquiu, New Mexico, which is about an hour from Santa Fe, where Mr. Gerard spent the last years of his life. And I had done another book, probably book 13, called Handmade Modern, that had a little essay about Mr. Gerard. And the book, just for no reason, was just kind of open on that page in my mom's studio. And her friend, who'd she'd known forever, came over and said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "Well, that's this." And Todd liked Mr. Gerard. And she said, "Well, I was his assistant for 10 years. And so she started sending me these incredible gifts that Mr. Gerard had gifted her, like make-ready sheets from La Fonda and little pillow pieces. And it went past fandom or interest in this thing into like full compulsion to get this book done. I don't know whether I was possessed by Mr. Gerard or just the desire to make all this beautiful work available to see in the world. But I was already a fan, and then I dove in. Oh my Lord. It is the deepest of wells. The book has over 2,600 images. By the time we gathered all the information, we had over 30,000 documents. The man was the most prolific man and the perfect pack rat, exact same measure. So he had everything in terrific shape, and his incredible concentration allowed us to make the book, but his beautiful gifts allowed the book to bloom. So it's my great pleasure to be with you tonight to share my love. So Mr. Gerard was an amazing man. He was born in 1907 in New York of an Italian mother and an American father. And he always sort of seemed perfectly to straddle perfectly different nations, different ideas, different concepts, different modes of modernity. He moved to Florence pretty early on and spent formative years there, and then arrived back in New York sometime later, where he picked up in New York his third architecture degree. He went to Rome and went in England and then got to New York. He was an amazing, prolific man that seemed to be supernatural in his ability to get things done. I spoke to 3 decades of studio assistants along the way, and they all had the exact same story. This, I thought, was a perfect example of the Gerard sense of humor. He was a very clever man with a very dark sense of humor, and I love that this is his idea of a family portrait. You'll see on the bottom that Susan, his lifelong love, and Marshall is on the left there, and Sansi is on the right. I can't imagine. Marshall Gerard, the whole family is genetically superior, I promise you. They're unbelievable, the gifts of this family. Susan, like many of the artists that I've had the pleasure to know or work with, there tends to be this one little special thing that happens when artists are wildly prolific, and I found that they tend to meet their mate early on in their careers, and they just switch from focusing on who am I dating to I'm working. And this man met an angel, Susan. And Susan, they met here, actually, in Michigan, and went on to produce not only beautiful children, but a whole lifetime of incredible works. This was a Herman Miller showroom that was done entirely in Mr. Gerard's tissue paper cutouts, replicating a Venetian village. And you see the little Eames piece sneaking in. That look on his face is almost in every single picture. He always looks like he's got the secret, and I expect a little mouse tail to be hanging out. He was extraordinary no matter what he did. This is some of his early watercolor paintings. He was, it would sound like an overstatement to say he was perfect at everything, but in this case, it's not an overstatement. The man could literally, no matter what medium, what it was, he picked up. Marshall, his son, speaks often about traveling with him. They'd go hiking up in the woods or in the mountains of New Mexico, and he'd pick up a rock and start carving it at once. But these pieces are very early on. This is work from the late 20s and early 30s, some of his work in Italy. Exquisite designs, and when I started the book, I thought I wanted to share as much of the Gerard process because that's always so fascinating and inspiring, and one of the reasons to do the book was for young eyes to see it and to see what a lifetime of hopeful design looks like. And As I started to try to show process, I found that it was almost impossible to do because Mr. Gerard's first drawings look exactly like the finished pieces. So it became simply redundant. Incredible, very peculiar both form and technique of these Venetian porcelains. They have the most luscious color sense, and whenever you see a metallic sheen, it's 24 gold paint. One year, Mr. Gerard, when living in Santa Fe, got a bandsaw for Christmas, and this is what happened about 2 days later. He made these dolls for his grandkids to play with, and they are extraordinary. You may have seen some of these dolls reproduced. Vitra has done an amazing job of bringing them back to life. However, what you're looking at, these are the original ones that Gerard carved and painted. Now, as I said, he could kind of do anything, so even just an exploration of what a twin bed would look like goes on for days. There was probably 80 gorgeous examples of what this bed could be like. I'm so charmed at the way he sort of messed with the 40s and 50s propriety of twin beds, because husband and his wife never slept in the same bed, right? So he would somehow do that kind of Lucy and Ricky thing, 2 twin beds together, but share the headboard, so it's sort of, it's connected, but still propriety one. The ottoman, no matter what he did, he seemed to sort of think in classification. The man had a Rolodex for a brain. He just could somehow switch and reform. Actually, one of his most important pieces was this incredible house called the Miller House in Columbus. And it's an extraordinary piece, but the documents on it are just as extraordinary as the place. Gerard turned over 4 file documents where the whole house was the same bit of information sorted 4 different ways. Here it was alphabetically, here it was by vendor, here it was by classification. Completely intricate handmade stuff. So when you look at something like his ottomans, now you'll notice these pieces in the middle on the right side are precursors to what showed up later in the Gerard Furniture Group, which we'll get to in a few moments. So I liked how an idea might appear first in 1929, make its way into the 30s, 40s, and then finally come to life in the 60s. These are very early 20s and 30s pieces, but look how he was perfectly blending a modernist aesthetic with classic old world techniques, like the piece on the upper right. How lovely those hand-carved stump legs with the beautiful inlay, the wood veneers with such naturalistic elements. But you see in 1939, listed on the bottom drawer, he loved initials, so whatever he did, he always tried to include whoever he was making the pieces for. That was for GJ? I don't know who GJ is. This is an exquisite piece. This was kind of done for a show house in New York. After he moved to New York and sort of started his career, he did this remarkable thing that there are just reams of information written about this house. It was so revolutionary and kind of set the design world on its ear. One of the things that was always of note was the first blow dryer. See that blow dryer in the compartment? That was the first time anyone had ever seen a blow dryer. And in true Gerard form, he made a compartment for it. His exquisite burled wood bar. Now, what you can't be seen here is the bar on the left is closed, on the right is open, but that below the place where the liquor is actually a table that extends out about 6 feet. So he was full of magic tricks, but always in look at how perfectly matched that burled wood veneer is. That almost becomes a secondary design. And his ideas were already formed right when he started in one of the earliest projects, which was this one from 1938 called Junior League Shop. This was in New York, and I look at it now and think it's so modern. It shares so many tenets of the way things are displayed today. Things were not shown like this at this time. And the beautiful vitrines, and it just was an exquisite place. And you're always tricked with Gerard. You're looking at the building, you're thinking one thing, and then look out the window. And we're seeing, that's what tells us the time. It's just remarkable that this is 1938. It feels like, the MoMA bookstore right now. It's incredible. And an early 30s project too called Charles Le Palme. This was a little indie restaurant in Upper East Side of New York, but look at this language, these bands of linoleum, some of the first linoleum laid in very simple colors. He was on a budget here, but it certainly doesn't show. He used the money very well. Everything was used for what showed. Nothing was behind the scenes. And I love the sort of hybrided sconces he made using just a perforated metal and some lights. The relief pieces on the wall are quite sweet too, different kinds of the dishes that were served there. This was a remarkable place too. This is all, keep in mind, this is all 30s. This was a women's exchange fair. So basically this is like the swap meet at your church. And in true Gerard form, everything he did to the complete, final possibility. This is exquisite. So it was a square room. These things lined all corners of the wall. And his beautiful topography here, we extracted and was able to rebuild and use it to create the headings that are in the book. It's a typeface that never saw the light of day before. But I mean, just look how great the food department works. Of course you're going to have a line there. Very beautiful. Now this is some Michigan magic right here. Now Detrola, have people heard of Detrola here? Does that ring a bell? Yeah, maybe? I have to say I'm a little surprised there's not some Detrola pieces in this exhibit because 1943, Mr. Gerard went to work for Detrola. He was hired to design radios and record players. And in true Gerard form, he got to work and he said, hey, do you mind if I redo my office? And they said, yeah, they said, okay. So here's a great, pardon me to derail and show you how amazing the drawings to the final products. Drawing on the right, finished product on the left. And look at this piece. This was a transistor radio that looks like a precursor to, I don't know, looks like an Apple product, in 1943. So while he was designing these, I mean, isn't that amazing? It looks so much like the modern Japanese turntables today. So while he was saying, I'm going to redo my desk, is that okay? So he redid his office, and everybody started showing him, this is amazing, well, will you redo my office? And that kept going until he finally had redone the entire building, including the factory. So this is the receptionist area, which I love in true Gerard form. I mean, clearly, it's not about having any personal stuff in this space. And there's only two functions, out and in, and don't get more than a 4-inch stack going. So this was Mr. Gerard's office that caused quite the stir. And one of the most interesting design elements is this drafting table that cranked with a crank underneath the desk that would ascend and descend depending on his needs. He also created these slanted working tables for displaying his drawings. But one of the most important things that came out of this, some of the other offices, was a friendship with Charles Eames. This is where Mr. Gerard hired Charles Eames to come join him to design the radios, where they just hit it off. And the classic wooden chair that we all know as an Eames piece, one night Charles Eames had come over to the Gerards for dinner to encounter Mr. Gerard's version of the chair that was done several years before. But it's interesting how we sniff these things in the air and the bending, and it was known that Charles said, well, I guess I don't have to do mine now, but thankfully he did. The bottom piece, I think, is a Gerard masterpiece. Look at how he takes a regular conference table, but by shearing off in slightly sort of almost little smiles the outside edges, it allows you a nicer ergonomic. You can get closer to your guest or your co-inhabitants, but your elbow room is still clear. Also, I love that he did bright ruby red and fuchsia. Mr. Gerard, there's a great comment from Mr. Gerard saying he recently wanted to make textiles, he got frustrated because he couldn't find primary colors like fuchsia. So I knew he knew that fuchsia was not a primary. However, in Mr. Gerard's world, it was a primary. So we went a few years past this. I'm skipping all around. There's so many projects. This book is, you'd be sand if I went through all of these projects by the end. So we're going to zip around. But this Unitarian church was an incredible marvel. And if you find yourself in Santa Fe, it's still there. And in 1965, Gerard had spent, this was at sort of the moment when he had spent collecting a lot of dilapidated barns that were falling around New Mexico. So he saved every piece of wood he could find and created this 60-foot mural celebrating all the different religions within this Unitarian church. Now, there was not one single piece of paint added to this mural. The wood was all sorted by tone, and he cut it and mitered it depending on what naturally had happened to the color. Anything you see that's sort of dark and sort of marble-like in there is the reaction from roofing nails piercing tar paper and then seeping into the wood. It's just absolutely exquisite. There is, however, a grand piano sitting on that stage, so through the magic of Photoshop, we restored it back to what Mr. Gerard would have wanted. So if you see it, you're going to have to move from side to side a little bit, but it's absolutely worth the trip. Now, this is a poster that you guys might recognize. It's right around the corner in a much larger form, but this was a very important part. This is a very important moment in design, but also for Mr. Gerard. 1961, this shop opened. Gerard had already been the design director for Herman Miller for many years. And he, along with his incredible modernist approach, he had such respect for the artisans of the world and had amassed the most astonishing collection of folk art. And he thought, because these modern ideas set so beautifully with these ancient hand-hewed materials, he opened what came to be known affectionately as T&O, which was the Textiles and Object Shop. Now, graphically, Mr. Gerard, once again, did everything when he pushed a project. He designed this, all the graphics and the posters that were used, but this is one of the most influential graphic documents of the last century. Many people, I'll admit too, I've stolen from it for sure. Jonathan Adler, I love Johnny, he'd admit it too. But many people have visited this as a design inspiration. But this shop was a revolution. It opened, it was an uptown in Manhattan on a little side street, and it was known as just opened for rapturous applause and then became known as the place that the Herman Miller employees used their employee discount. Because it was so peculiar, and people were in there and delighted, and so baffled that they really didn't even know what to do. He used all of these amazing lighting techniques. He was the first person to use exposed light bulbs. He designed the light bulbs. When he did a lighting scheme, he designed the light bulbs. So the ceiling in this is completely pavé with exposed filament light bulbs casting this exquisite white, clean, shadowless glow over everything. So as you see, his beautiful modernist textiles fit in perfectly with an ancient Mexican church. Really beautiful. He would mix together, he loved nothing was as interesting to him as it was in proximity to something else. So whether he was mixing tones and wools and taking what was used as roof flashing and making those little corner ornaments, it's still, no matter what he did, it always looked like Gerard. He was the first person to embed lights into the spokes of the etagere that's supporting it, so there was a constant glow around the room. And everything, no matter what object was placed there, was fully illuminated without shadow. He designed incredible sweet pillow motifs. Now these thankfully are coming back to life through the graces of Herman Miller in vitro. But see what I mean with the smile? He does look like he's got a secret there, doesn't he? This shop was a very big success and created a lot of stir for about the 14 months it was open. La Fonda del Sol was another zenith of design, which it's hard to imagine a world without Mexican food at every other block, but there was a time. And in New York most especially, this was the first South American restaurant to open in New York, and they were the smartest people ever to hire Gerard to do it. Now what you're seeing right there behind that is an exquisite tile mural that was done in the very first open kitchen. An open kitchen is such a classic design motif now, but this was sort of the first document that it appeared. Once again, Gerard did everything. From the guacamole cart we see top and center, to the uniforms that he partnered with Rudy Gernrich to make. Rudy Gernrich was an astonishing designer who worked constantly through the 50s and 60s and probably is most famous for his topless swimsuit, the monokini. So it made perfect sense that Gerard would also partner with such a sort of a design hellraiser. He did the hot water switch in the bathroom. He did the front door. It was literally every single surface that could be affected, Gerard affected. He designed every sugar cube, every matchbook. And when he didn't design it, he called upon his friend Charles Eames to come up with something, which you see the bucket chair having the back lowered about 8 inches to expose the dinnerware more beautifully. This is a great shot that was in Life magazine that sort of shows you the hubbub and the serving procedure at beautiful La Fonda del Sol. I'm praying that someone will bring this back someday. I just think it would be the most amazing experiment. Gerard, of course, did all of the flatware. The drawings for it, which I won't share with you now, are almost identical. They're very, very beautiful. The salt and pepper shakers on the left. This is his original drawing for that tile work. Now, this is about a 4-foot wide gouache painting with not one mistake, not one piece of corrective whiteout, no tabbing, nothing. It's absolutely flawless. And that was the way with every document we saw. I know this does not sound possible, but it was. If there was a mistake, it went in the trash, and it was started over until it was completed without mistake. Unbelievable. It doesn't seem humanly possible. These were his original paintings for the coasters and matchbooks at La Fonda. There were over 84 paintings made for the matchbooks. This is a design marvel. This is the menu that one would arrive. Now, do you see that the menu folds up? You'll see in the center section on the left, there's a little address. So this was a menu that a fan took from their trip to La Fonda and wrote Mr. Gerard a lovely fan letter, sort of up the crease there, but it folded down, and it's still one of the most, I mean, the color sense, the way it worked with, like, we have these, bad rules in design sometimes, like no more than 3 typefaces, where George's like, screw it, let's do 12. And he was right. Now, also, this is where his magicianship was in full bloom, because this is the floor plan for La Fonda, which is, I mean, any design students here know this is a nightmare. No one would want to inherit a long railroad space like this, full of, fixes and turns. How could anybody design this? But Gerard knew that his customers would be coming back. So instead of lamenting it, he created 7 different dining experiences, from sort of an open-aired piece around that kitchen, which is in the middle, to private dining rooms. He would just sort of build a room within a room to create another space, and that beautiful piece with the cupola that's in the upper side. So no matter how many times you went to La Fonda, I guess as long as you went more than 7, you had a different experience. It was pretty great. And at the very same moment, just within about 2 years, Gerard did this wildly elegant place called L'Etoile. L'Etoile was a couple of streets down from where La Fonda was, but it was sort of the height of French chic. He worked with Eames to reupholster reupholstered several pieces, and then started what we see as the beginning of what was called the Gerard Group at Herman Miller. See the beautiful little chairs, and he did it all in classic French colors, red, white, and blue, which I think also could be interpreted as a nod to America, I'm sure. And I love these enameled daisy tables he did. Now, many of the photographs you're seeing tonight, including these, were shot by Charles Eames. They were such dear friends and in such support of each other that whenever Mr. Gerard had a project finished, he would ask Charles to come photograph it for him, and he would. So we're very grateful that we had such beautiful photography to use in the book, and also grateful to the Eames estate to allow us. The upstairs dining room of L'Etoile caused quite a bit of controversy. As you see, it's vivid. It was all black and white, and it was, there was a lot of comments made by reporters talking about that it was really hard to even focus on your date while you were in that room. But I love in Gerard's world, it seemed perfectly, of course it makes sense to put 20 geometric patterns that abut each other, entirely wrap the room in it. It's soothing, right? This is a long shot up the middle, which once again sort of speaks to his great effort at making experiences, multiple experiences. The piece that's sort of in the middle room, there was an amazing, sort of like an unfurled orchid that was made out of glass and metal that functioned as the dessert tray. L'Etoile, meaning star, he took it quite literally and engraved the over 200 French luminaries into the glasswork that surrounded the parapet. It was an exquisite place, and like several of these Gerard restaurants, they lasted for brief times, and unfortunately there's really no relics left of L'Etoile at all. 1965 was another important year for changing the way things worked in the world. Braniff Airlines was this sort of dinky airlines based out of Texas, flying back and forth to South America. And an ad agency got the idea when they were tasked to redo Braniff, why don't we get somebody interesting to design this thing? And interesting they did. So they got Mr. Gerard, who immediately just started re-examining everything. He took the entire fleet of 54 planes, divided them up into 7 colors, and painted these very non-traditional colors. And the most important thing he changed is he redevised and redivided the way we look at the color alliteration on airplanes. In his eyes, he says, why does everything have to look like Buck Henry? They're birds. Make them look like birds. So he added those little beaks and sort of, nestled in the facial structure there. But this was an unbelievable volume of design here. Now, the interior of a plane could contain anywhere from 7 to 12 different materials, and not just from the same palette. So what you're seeing is a combination of the over 100 textiles he designed for Braniff. So you might see, it might be an entirely rust and amber plane that would have shots of blue or cobalt that ran throughout. He designed the seating areas, the ticket counters, every bit of paper ephemera from your tickets to the thing that said, the baggage tag that was attached to your suitcase. He worked with Emilio Pucci to design the costumes, which were really funny. I think it was the last time you could actually talk a woman into wearing a plastic bubble on her head, which he did. The costumes required 7 changes per flight. Now, can you believe this? 7 changes. There was a greeting outfit. It just went on and on and on. So I can't. The idea of it is so crazy, but the fact that they actually got cooperation to this, it would not work today. Let's just say that. This is the pieces he did for Braniff, which thankfully the Herman Miller Company got very excited about it and offered to produce what was known as a Gerard Furniture Group, and it's an exquisite piece. Mr. Gerard had a lot of faith in us as humans and and had faith in our choices. I think he might have overestimated us, because in this collection, there was over 300 textiles that were available, and as you see, the bottom the bottom covering is one material. There's a rubber welting, there's a bottom cushion, then there's the 2 cushions in the back, and then more behind that. Well, all of those were available for your choice, and there were not like selected color palettes for you to go, oh, that one. You had to put it together. So I have a feeling that might ultimately be the reason why this group only lasted about a year and a half. But they are so beautiful and so exquisite, and I'm glad they appear later. I'll tell you more about this, but these are incredible opportunities to see how Gerard could just see the beauty in everything, including, if you look, that large pink lozenge is one of the friendliest barf bags you'll ever see. And the little note, which is hard to read there, is actually quite sweet. And it says, just in case you're not ill, you might want to take this later and use it for something special. So he was always thinking about how he was programming your life for you. Hemisphere was one of the world fairs that appeared in 1968 in San Antonio, Texas. Gerard was asked to work on it, where he worked for a couple years. This is sort of where the folk arts just went bonkers. So as usual, he created not only the typefaces, the posters. This is a great shot of he and Susan, chic as ever on the outside, and probably it's about 180 degrees in San Antonio in the middle of summer, and they just looked fantastic. Gerard designed this amazing building that was part of the experience. It was kind of part of like a ride almost. You can kind of see the different forms, and he created these long banks of stairways for crowd control that were painted different colors on different sides. So no matter where you were always experiencing something new. And the outside was quite magnificent and, fully Gerard and absolutely beautiful, but just didn't, I love the snake on the side, but it never quite prepared you for what you saw inside. This is just one of the 40 exhibits that were made on the inside. This is heaven and hell. And this is not photoshopped, I swear, this is real. And can you believe this? I mean, it just went on and on. So Hemisphere, people, there's so much beautiful, fond, reverent words written about Hemisphere. Gerard moved to Grosse Pointe in the 40s. And he just right away started setting up his own studio, which was often, in this case, was in a deserted hamburger restaurant. And his first one, he carried that sign. That's a beautiful red lacquered sign with those extruded letters that say Gerard. And that sign went with him through all the different versions. But one of the sweetest things that I like about Mr. Gerard, besides his extraordinary talent, was his fandom. He was such a fan. He loved being in proximity to smart people. He loved the passion of the antiquities. He loved modern thinking. And he wanted everyone around him to sort of bask in that glow. So while the studio was exquisite during the day, those roll-up blinds and things could be converted so that it would allow him to become an exhibition space, where he would then show works that were important to him or support his fans. Like was the first place to show Calder's jewelry, Picasso lithograph, Eskimo crafts, Saul Steinberg drawings, these beautiful graphic documents. These were the invitation cards. But his generosity, not only of wanting everyone that experiences design to enjoy it, but towards supporting the arts and others was quite admirable. I love this shot. This is a picture taken inside of his studio. And I think what's behind him finally explains that little bit of a look, because that is like a sea of toxic supplies behind him. So I imagine he was probably kind of high the whole time, I bet, from those incredible inks and paints he was exposed to. But he has that face on way too many times for me to not wonder. But as I said, he was friends and great reverent to these people like Charles and Ray Eames. And what I liked they're very photogenic, obviously, but there always is something a little special. Mr. Gerard holds his pose almost in everyone. He's got his poker face on, but everyone around him lights up. This is working with Carl Taney, one of his assistants, and Charles on Braniff. Mr. Gerard wore a tie in his home to work. And it was very interesting with his assistants, because when he was at the office, he would every morning come to work. You would work in quiet, and he would disappear right after lunch. And then the students or the assistants would stay through the day. Then they'd come back the next morning, and there would be this volume of drawings that could not have been done in the time frame that he was missing. So it happened over and over and over. 3 decades of assistants confirm this. And I honestly can't tell you how he produced this stuff. The drawings are so precise and so intricate and so big, it just doesn't seem humanly possible. He didn't work in front of people that often, so I'm not removing magic from the possibility to some degree, but it really just doesn't make sense. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't think it was exactly possible. This is a lovely shot with I am Pei visiting Mr. Gerard in TNO when it opened. Now, this is a really interesting peek inside of the Gerard studio. This is I love the way he just built this plywood box around his, the file cabinet while working on this beautiful bent wood piece that became part of the Gerard group. This was the front door to his studio, which was entirely made from reclaimed wood. You can see the shadow work there. It was about a 3-inch dimension on it. This was amazing. Okay, there were millions of these things, and this is Gerard's storage system. And there were just endless little, these are slightly linear, like Far Eastern fabrics and 3x6 cards, but they got weirder. And when you started opening, the precision and the organization, like that's all just round bank pins. And you'll see in the lower left, you'll see a tissue box from Saks Fifth Avenue. Now, Susan was a very dignified woman, and when she arrived in New Mexico, she discerned that the toilet tissue was just not up to speed in New Mexico. So I didn't even realize it, but you could buy toilet paper at Saks Fifth Avenue. So all of the toilet tissue and facial tissue came from Saks Fifth Avenue in the Gerard studio. Now, this is another one of the crazy boxes. So this is the 1/2 inch and 1 inch scale. People Now, keep in mind that he photographed all of these people, printed them those sizes, cut them out, and then mounted them all those little lead bases. And this is just a teeny bit of them. There was an army of these people. Okay, this is the backwards word index. Now, we've identified the pink cards as palindromes. The rest is all up for anyone's debate here. But there were boxes of these things. His grandchildren, who are just madly in love with him, talk endlessly about the linguistic games they would play. They would spend hours just mispronouncing and repronouncing words. And he just sounded like a blast. These are some of his crazy color selections, whether it be lacquering tests or his felt collection, or the upper left where his actual designs, which were part of called Mexicottons, a very extensive group that Herman Miller produced. These are his striped studies, and these are all just drawn. These are all, and I think what's the largest number there, 40? It went up into the 80s. Really something. Now this is where things got really crazy. There were these folders or binders that just had things like books, and inside were literally pictures and pictures and pictures of books. And so this was in the archive in one of the studios, and his organization was astonishing. He had these beautiful archival boxes that he covered in handmade papers from around the world. Now, picture that and picture that. Can you imagine how beautiful that would have been? So I love that he had the good sense to know that what he did was important, and he put it in archival things to start. I found in looking back, this is just my observations, but I feel pretty sure about it, that I think Mr. Gerard's homes were his ultimate experiment. This is a lovely picture of he and Susan in their Grosse Pointe house with what I suspect is a not ADA compliant staircase. This is some of the earliest work we have in the book, which was from 1929. Now picture this. This is Gerard as a sophomore in college, comes home and goes, "Mom and Dad, do you mind if I redo my room?" And this is what happens. So, I mean, 1929, look at the work on the pillows in the back. They look practically digitized. And the Gerard magic was in place. But I love that this is a sophomores in college bachelor pad. Just incredible. And then it just kept going. This was his first real bachelor pad before he met Susan in New York. Now, this is a perfect example of Gerard's practicality blended with folly, an equal measure. This sofa, which is very beautiful, it's a cobalt blue, and the cushions are white leather on one side and black mohair on the other, because in the summer it's too hot to sit on mohair, so the cushions, everything just reversed. That was an incredible mural that was painted in 4 tones along the back wall. First time I'd ever seen text used as ornament. This says cheers in many, many different languages. And look at the terrific resolve to one of the classic New York design problems. What do you do on either sides of a window in a skinny room? So you could see these problem-solving techniques merging perfectly with gorgeous design. This was a house that he lived in Grosse Pointe, and worked with this amazing painter that he continued to work with through the years. But I love that, you see, like, Gerard was not afraid of a little danger, clearly, because you can see the banister. He just took it out and put this beautiful little decorative rope that would hold exactly no one should you fall off. But, you know, he trusted you'd make it down just fine, and he was right. No one died. This is the last house he made in Grosse Pointe, which was really exquisite. That's Sansi, his daughter, and he basically patched together a little neighborhood of houses. There were several houses in a row that he kind of just blended and used all of sort of Gerard greatest hits. This is his beautiful reclaimed wood. This is an outside patio. And Gerard really looked at interior design, especially like a gardener might, because it was never finished. It was just a constant state of evolution. The book was a bit of a forensic nightmare, because we'd have the same room, but it would be decorated about 12 times. And we couldn't quite patch it together. But you see, that's a bent wall that has candles on it here. Here it is at night. It kept changing and changing. Sometimes it was hung. And then he decided it was just too busy in Grosse Pointe. He had to get out of here so he could get some work done, and moved to Santa Fe. So at the time, Santa Fe was very, very empty. And this was his first house there. It was just this extraordinary blend of adobe building mixed with Gerard's modernist touch. He just loved living in New Mexico. Now, the only thing that's left of this entire house is that zig in this wall, outside wall, and that mountain behind it is completely not visible. It is completely built over at this point. Unfortunately, it's just condominiums, but this is the outside courtyard in that house, which was sort of, you know, with his Italian roots, he loved an outdoor area. But this mural is extraordinary. The mural wraps around 3 sides of the garden. Where the mural intersects the interior wall is the same mural painted in pastel colors, like powder blue, creams, and browns. This is his crayon sketch, which was just a kind of a quick dash, and it's still extraordinary and almost exactly like the finished piece. He loved mixing these sort of industrial etagères and things together, but if you look just past the etagère, you'll witness what is documented as the first conversation pit. is the earliest document of this ever being. Now, we don't know why exactly, but Gerard used this in other things, but ended up taking it out of this house with a very brief time. Everything was up for grabs, including any sort of wall. So we just removed the sheetrock, took the insulation out, moved the supports around to match the artwork perfectly, and repositioned it. I'm so smart. The kitchen. This is one of his great rooms within a room. Every cabinet was a different experience, whether it was, you see, there was actually beans and different legumes and vegetables inset into glass. Sometimes there were trompe-l'oeil paintings. Sometimes it was conversions that ran around the top. It just went on and on. This is just for his private house. And this photo always makes me laugh, because I bet this must have been the most common sight in the Gerard house, seeing him replace light bulbs. Because there's hundreds and hundreds of light bulbs in everything that he did. He and Susan enjoying a nice moment in that gorgeous modernist retreat. But great ergonomic consideration. Look how Gerard made that perfect dip to increase the cushion so you would be comfortable, yet left the ergonomic support for your feet to be able to enjoy the radiant heat coming from the fire. He always just got it perfect. Now this is the outside of the kitchen where you saw those crazy things was also very unusual. He built all these little niches in for specific things, from his cigarettes to the radio. The dot at the upper left is actually a speaker, and his dog bed. So the dog actually loved that bed that was built in the wall between the kitchen and the dining room. That dog's name was Brownie. It's a very sweet. Now, this is a real masterpiece. 1961, this is in Grosse Pointe, and some of the work that Gerard did for others. Mr. Reefshell was a doctor, and he just said, carte blanche, just come up with something for me. Well, I thought it was interesting. Reefshell, of note, was the man who discovered Benadryl. And I always thought he must have been high on Benadryl to have Mr. Gerard agree to some of this stuff, because basically what Gerard did was build 4 separate houses and connected it all with these pathways. And each house had a specific use. So this was the sleeping house, this was the day house, this was the kitchen, this was the living room. So you kind of you moved around. But he would create these 80 and 90 foot non-repeating patterned rugs that ran through the Miller house. Have you ever seen Fur So Deep? I don't even know what it is. As a vegetarian, I'm a little unnerved, but I think that it's, it's like 6 foot, 6 inch deep fur. Incredible. This is an interesting point of view, because you can see the fireplace here grounds your point of view as you go around. But the house, no matter where you were coming from or where you were headed, was a different experience. The same thing in this, it was called Hallmark Vacation Home, but it was also used just to sort of put visitors up when they visited the Hallmark offices. And once again, one of his great models. But one of the nicest things on the left, you'll see he created a 60-foot panel of Hallmark ephemera and history that he sort of matched with this modernist garden, and that the fountain that he designed in the back. There's a similar mural that's in the John Deere building in Dearborn, which is still up and available for visit, which you guys should have a look and see. It's really quite remarkable. But sort of once again, it's the first time that things were really built in. It just didn't work like that. And one of the people that was Mr. Gerard's biggest fans, and likewise was J. Irwin Miller. He was an extraordinary supporter of the arts. Has anybody been to Columbus and seen this? I mean, oh my gosh, right? Extraordinary. So Gerard worked endlessly for the Millers, and this was one of the first Miller offices. And one of the things that cracks me up about what he did for Miller, you can't tell in any capacity what was done in these places. This was some of the first exposed light bulbs. Can you imagine approaching these Victorian sensibilities on the outside of the building to see these raw light bulbs? I mean, that must have been an amazing experiment. He would take a single idea, the circular light flow from the bulbs, and then etch them into glass, or create these partitions that moved throughout so were endlessly convertible rooms. This is another office called the Cummings Motor Office, and I think this one's particularly interesting because you for sure have no idea what's going on in this place. The patterns on the back are 2 unique patterns from a series he did called Paleo. However, these are not included in the Paleo series. These were just kind of a little detour. Once again, we put carpet on the walls, these dense blue velvet curtains. It's gorgeous, but what's going on? Can you imagine? Very, very beautiful. And then one of probably the zenith of Gerard's design with Irwin Miller was what we now know as the Miller House. It's now open to the public, and I urge everyone who hasn't seen it to please go. It's just exquisite. Irwin Miller tasked Eero Saarinen to design the place, with Gerard doing the interiors and Dan Kiley to do the exterior design. But it was extraordinary. He's way more than a gardener, I promise you. This house was amazing. It has all of Saarinen's exquisite lighting techniques. The walls are actually lined in marble. These are 9-foot panels of marble that pass around all areas. Now, this was an excellent version of Gerard's conversation pit. Now, you see that's Eero Saarinen and Mrs. Gerard back there at the piano, but Mrs. Miller who was a very conservative woman, was quite concerned about propriety and the fact that you might be able to see up ladies' dresses when you were sitting in that pit. So we've got to test it. So they built a full-scale one, a model to see how it would work. And all it revealed, instead of the upskirts, was the underside of the piano could be seen, which Gerard quickly lacquered in Chinese red. So it can only be seen. The cushions that surround the seating pit were changed quarterly. There's an entire palette of slipcovers that move every time. Seasonally, they're completely different. You'll see vestiges of Eames pieces. There were several Eames pieces that he plated the legs gold on. He would take these little heads are carved from Fiji, and he had them adapted and used as legs for the stool. Oh, this is a timber box, the lower left. You see all those? These are inset sideways cuts of branches that are inset into the wood. But what you can't see is at the top, there's a little button in one of them. You press it, it's got a pneumatic lift that opens it, and it's lined in tin. It's the wood box that supplies the fireplace right next to it. Now, there are no light switches in this place. There are only toggles. And you'll go on that side of the room, hit a toggle, and there's a glass parade that moves around that fireplace, and when it hits the end, it all turns at one time. Just like astonishing ingenuity for this time. It was like the Jetsons' house for real. It was really the cabinetry behind was amazing. Gerard, he examined, like Margaret Mead, he examined the Millers about everything they did, and those cabinets contain, like one of them is for the Millers' violin collection, color-coded in different shades of raspberry and plum to match it's a deep well of crazy. Really something. Really something. Oh, and I have messed something up. Can someone help me? Sorry. I'm not sure what to do. Yeah, I just need to get back to the other side. Sorry. Talk amongst yourselves for a moment. I bet it's the green one. Right there.
Oh.
Okay. Takes a village. It takes a village. We're getting there.
No. Oh.
Full screen, one more. There we go. Yay! Thank you. Well done. Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you. Excellent. Okay. Where was I? No. Anyway. So this is an incredible shot of the dining room. Now the floors in this are travertine. Now picture that the travertine is all over the floor and then arcs up to create the base of the table. It's one giant piece that just arcs up. The walls, you can slightly see the marble pieces, and the cushions are amazing. They were needle pointed by Mrs. Miller's Bridge Club, and they contain, this is one of the original pieces when it first came on. This is what it looks like now. That's what it looked like when it was made. But Gerard would create these amazing Easter processionals. Like, he designed everything. The bend of every one of those arcs that holds the candles is in the blueprints. Sort of a precursor to floor rug, it's these incredible patchwork. He actually did something that would look, I think he might have invented Post-it notes, because he doesn't know this, but for the Miller house, he did a series of exact pastel yellow, green, and pink notes that said Xenia Miller. Here's a great shot of the cushions and a mysterious hand in the middle. These are the drawings here of the original collages that were done with paint chips for the Millers. And you can see the initials. There's where's Xenia? There, the one in the middle there, that's Xenia. It's pretty amazing. There we go. Once again, in true form, on the left, this is a hybrid of an M being the Miller. He got George Jensen to produce these. And now the middle is a color coding for the towel system that went through the house. In the lower right-hand corner of every towel in chain stitch were concentrically embroidered dots that told the cleaning staff which area to put it back in. And on the right is Xenia Miller's tissue paper for wrapping presents in the wrapping room, and I'm not kidding. Gerard worked, as I mentioned, worked with Herman Miller for many years as design director for most of them, but he also, his magic seeped into other things like in presentation. These kinds of presentation books were not seen prior to Mr. Gerard coming up with them for his wallpaper collections. Now, he was a very practical man and never wanted to show off, so he decided that wallpaper's task was to either, to guide you from one room to the next or support whatever you were hanging on to it. But he loved vivid color, and so he would come up with these things that were friendly to the eye but humble enough to whatever you were putting on top would still work very gracefully. They look as fresh as they ever did, and I think this one, from 1967, this was the debut of the Gerard Group for Herman Miller. And it was sort of based on, like we said, the start of the Braniff pieces, but it still remains some of the most influential furniture. Exquisite color sense, but you can see, I mentioned earlier about Mr. Gerard's faith in us perhaps have been overestimated. Can you imagine like trying to figure out what all 5 pieces of materials all went together? They were very smart, very friendly, and this was some of the promotion images that were photographed for it. You would think they would be shot at the factory, but no, they were all the materials were flown to Santa Fe. There was a huge tent erected, and this stuff was built inside. Now, Gerard, no detail was too small to ignore. See on the left image, there's a clock in the upper right-hand corner. That's a digital clock. Pretty startling for the time. But Gerard wanted it clad in something different. So he had a sort of a secret weapon, this guy named Doc that worked at his studios that could get anything done. He sent Doc to all of the butcher shops around to find the biggest calf bones he could find. He went back, they sheared it into 1/8-inch slivers, then put them into 2-inch squares, dried them, boned them, clad them to the outside of that clock that was used in the back of the photo, and it's as an ornament. That's not for sale, that's just a piece that's supporting that image. The carpet you see there was done in a similar way. He sent them all over town to collect scraps. They were then sharded into those little 2-inch pieces and attached to plywood. So the degree to get what he knew was important was amazing, including models. These are his models for the Gerard Group, and the thing that really tickled me was the legs are finishing nails he painted gold. This was Gerard at work at Herman Miller doing, there was an interesting office, sort of, the first cubicles were done at Herman Miller, and upon their introduction, it was called Action Office, and it felt a little antiseptic, and the idea of it was pretty dry to start, and its neutral colors just felt a little drab, so they asked Gerard to come in and see if he could spruce the place up, and boy did he ever. He created what was debuted in 1972, but were done as these panels that have now been reintroduced, and they were made to either hang on ceilings, walls, wherever you wanted to put them. And I'm very happy to say just about 2 months ago, they were just reintroduced by Vitris, so they're back in the world again. The piece, this is his drawing on the right, this is the finished piece on the left, also Charles Eames photos. You probably recognize this iconic motif. I think you have it in one of the pieces down here. Oh, this is a very beautiful piece called Bouquet. This is unusual because it was done on a striped background that was woven in Mexico. He set up worked with artisans in Mexico to weave these rough-hewn textiles, but this is sweet. The original silkscreen for this piece is actually installed in the show that's on the first floor of the Kemble, right? That's where the second piece is. I'm asking, right? Okay, I saw it, I'm just not sure where I was. It's there. So you guys should go have a look, it's quite beautiful. The pieces were extraordinary and still feel just as fresh today. This one on the left makes me crack up because as a New Yorker, sort of the last thing you want is a brick wall. It's a motif, but I thought that was pretty sweet. The Herman Miller years were amazing productive time for Gerard. Not only did he do all the textiles that he was tasked for, he would do the graphics. So this was for the introduction for the San Francisco showroom, which opened in 1958. This was an interesting place because it was formerly a brothel, and formerly. Then Gerard and the Herman Miller Group had gone around, and Gerard saw something in this strange Baroque fancy place that seemed very special, and boy, he did an amazing installation. And the cupola on the left has the floats that are in the back of toilets cut in half and used as ornaments. Everything was up. I love this as a graphic sensibility. Like I said, not only would he design the graphics, he would design every typeface. And he was so natural at folly and precision. You know, working with type is very tricky, and there's all sorts of things. You know, serifs guide our eyes to the next word. There's all sorts of rules that Gerard seemed to either inherently know or not care about. I don't know what it was, but he just did it in ways that broke every rule but worked. And also, this was printed on tissue paper. What a peculiar thing to print on tissue paper, and it's quite large. The piece on the left is kind of sweet. It's called Traveling Man. It's Charles Eames and George Nelson and Gerard all kind of waiting for the train, I guess. But the piece on the left was to introduce the textile collection, and Gerard designed that beautiful, complex, almost origami-like presentation panel that unfurled. These were pieces that were made with the Mexican artisans, and his color sense, as you see, is extraordinary, featuring his primary fuchsia there. These were non-repeating panels. Now, non-repeating stripes are just about as big a nightmare to produce as one could imagine. But the fact that Gerard could do it with grace and at 60 inches made them marvels. Just his reconsideration of a classic check. As someone who has worn Vans their whole life, it always makes me happy to see the connective tissue from the Vans surfer shoes and Gerard's classic checks. Beautiful color sense, beautiful wovens, and many of these have now been reintroduced by Vitra, so I'm happy they're back in the world. When Gerard would make a print, he would often explore it in tissue paper, making collage first, and this is the original tissue paper collage for Multiform. This is a Charles Eames photo. This is how supportive the guy was. These are just the production photos that were used in the back to show take-up, and Charles Eames shot them. This is Palio, which I mentioned to you earlier, was in the Cummings office. He used all of these. This was the master fabric, and then each one of those stripes was put into a repeat separately, except for the two that were used in the Cummings house. And that's like too much information, isn't it? That's way too much minutia. This is a beautiful piece called Rain, which is hard to understand exactly when you're looking closely at it, but when you see a giant piece, it absolutely feels like tumbling water. This is Mikado, an exquisite piece that thankfully Vitra has also brought back to life. Feathers, this is one of the most important pieces that he did. But in pure generosity of design, and I don't really know any others that would do this, Gerard allowed not only the colors to be changed, but screens to be dropped. So if you wanted, say, this to be half as busy as it was, you could just remove, screens and sort of create something else. Very generous of spirit. Probably one of the most knocked off design inspirations. This is called Eden. You'll take a good look at this and you'll start recognizing how everybody's ripped this off for about 30 years now. Eden came in, Gerard's was just an extraordinary colorist. He had no idea that colors should be kept in their corral. He would mix the most counterintuitive combinations to the most exquisite results. He loved makeup colors too. There's a lot of peculiar fleshy tones mixed with vibrant, almost fluorescent. Just an exquisite piece. This is called Quatrefoil, another piece that was done with tissue paper. This one has not, the original Quatrefoil was a print. It has come back to life as a woven with Meharam, and it's quite nice. This is called Alphabet Stripe, a really lovely piece. But this is a full color variation that was available in this. You can see how subtle and the shifts were in tone, but how gorgeous every one of them is. Ribbons, which is another lovely piece, and this is also on display. You can see it for real in the downstairs at the Kimball. January was one of my very favorite fabrics for lots of reasons. It's very beautiful, certainly very beautiful, but technically it's a real marble. You have no sense of repeat in this piece. And it has the most beautiful colors. But one of the things that really struck me is that Gerard's work is drenched in optimism, but there was something about this that just seemed as buoyant and lovely and hopeful as possible. And I love that he named it January. And it's that hope that sort of makes me have faith in design and just have faith in the future. And I know that I got there so much because of Mr. Gerard. So I thank you so much for your time today and allowing me to share my passion. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any, but also happy to leave you alone if you'd like. Whatever works. Do we have any questions? Yes?
Are his houses and Grosse Pointe still there?
I'm sorry to report that they're not. They have been, it's just heartbreaking. But unfortunately, with the exception of the Miller House, there's another house called the Scorin House, which is outside of Los Angeles, which Gerard did in later days, and parts of that are still there, but for the most part, they're all gone. It's quite heartbreaking. But thankfully, we have all the drawings and the good documents.
Where are
Yeah.
the archives, and can they be visited?
The archives, the main chunk of the archives were deacquisition to Vitra in the 90s. So they're in Wilhelmrhein, outside of Basel in Switzerland, and they're spectacular. So you could get in, but you'll have to set it up in advance, and it's absolutely astonishing. The book, as giant as it is, still represents, we had to leave so much out, the book became unbindable. We could not get another page in the book. I'm not kidding. It was ridiculous. Yes?
My question is to follow up on the last question.
Uh-huh.
They're all gone. How many houses did you design? How many were built? When you say they're all gone, how many of those?
Well, I'm not sure the exact amount. We don't even have a full document. We know the names of some of them that there's truly no records on, but I think that there's probably private residences were in the 50 or 60 projects through the years. He would work, because his work was so extensive, he didn't take on tons of work, but he would maybe work on 2 or 3 a year and really, really get in there. But for the most part, the work wasn't protected. It was just kind of made for families or for friends. And unfortunately, time just remodeled them, or they were torn down and condos were built. But I have no idea exactly how many. There are many, many in the book. And that's...
There is one in Grosse Pointe that we discovered. There's a couple that's trying to restore.
Really?
It wasn't one that he lived in, but the one that he
What he worked on. Do you remember what the name of it was? I'm sorry? Ah, yes, I've seen pictures of that. It's not in the book, that one.
No, you mentioned it, but.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting, well, that'd be great if somebody, anybody that could bring the work back to life would be fantastic. The details are so rich and thorough that it's possible. It would be hard to take out Gerard fully from any place. You could probably bring it back at some point.
You mentioned his assistants.
Mhm.
How big was his studio? How many people did he have working with him?
It was very small. He had at the most 2 assistants at any time. And he was mysterious. He was a very mysterious man, very kind. And the assistants loved him. They were in awe of him. And he was super kind, but when you were there to work, you did not speak, you didn't do anything, you kept your head down, get your work done, and then you would go for cocktails at 5, or whatever he would invite you to, and then that was great social time. They were wonderful hosts, he and Susan, but they were dead serious, and I just can't figure out how he did it. I'm not kidding. It just doesn't make sense, the volume of drawings. I mean, Vitra has this room that's just flat file after flat file after flat file of stacked tissue and vellum drawings of 4 foot wide. How?
What do you think his favorite medium was?
Oh my. I think his lack of favorite medium was his favorite medium, frankly, because he was a magician with anything. I mean, stone, paint, paper. I mean, he could truly do anything. In the book, there's these exquisite presents that he would make for Susan. He was very much in love with Susan and would endlessly carving her like astonishing things. I actually saw a box that we left out of the book because it was made out of a baby skull, but it was very peculiar. But he just endless presents, beautiful carved things that don't even seem humanly possible, much less done in volume. He was extraordinary. But the first chunk of the book has a lot of those pieces in it. Yes? He was classically influenced. He leaned into the future, but his knowledge and respect was really for the past. He came from many generations of Italian artisans. His grandfather was a master carver. It just was his DNA. So he really had such a strong understanding of art history, both architectural and decorative arts. And that seemed to be where the roots came from, but because his presence brought a modernity to whatever he was doing that sort of allowed it to land like Gerard. He was great fans of his contemporaries that he worked with, but I can't see the influence I can't see Eames' influence on Gerard. I can see Gerard's influence on Eames big time, but I don't see the other direction. Same with Nelson. All masters and amazing, but Gerard was really kind of on another planet. But very, very sweet. He's a cool guy, so people liked being around him. Yes?
Were there things that you now know he didn't do because his hand is so complete?
Ah.
And I'm thinking like, eyewear.
He did do that. He did that too. I haven't seen buttons, but I've seen knobs that look like buttons. What didn't he do? One thing he didn't do well was he was very shy. So he had a nightmare of a time being admired. That's his only, I wouldn't even call it a deficiency. It's so charming because there was a code with his assistants. If anybody became overly fawning, the assistants would say, "Mr. Gerard, would you like a drink?" And then they would bolt to an opposite corner of the room. It was like Xing through the room the whole night. He was very shy, and Susan the whole family would run interference for him because he just couldn't take the attention. He just kind of wanted to disappear. But for what he physically couldn't do, I have no idea. There may not be anything. He may truly have been able to do every single thing that a human's ever done. I believe it. I believe it. Yes?
How have you personally evolved?
Well, I have the ability, like Mr. Gerard, to be a fan without copying. So while I certainly share a bold color sense with Mr. Gerard and a respect for history and the love of modernity, I think that's the spirit of him is a kinship I feel with him, and of influence more than the physical moves and lines. But I love his thirst for knowledge and his respect for artisans. So to me, that's probably the thing that has become more revved up in me. I'm quite passionate. It's just being in proximity to something beautiful is the biggest thrill, in my life at least. So I think Gerard might have been able to say that too. But you guys have a great night upon you because there's all this beauty in this museum, and you'll get to see some terrific Gerard stuff. And I really appreciate you coming out to let me speak up Mr. Gerard and to support modernity in this beautiful place. So thank you so much.
What a great talk, very interesting. Todd, thank you so much for coming out to Michigan to do this. It's just fascinating. Todd, of course, his book, if you haven't seen his book, it's gorgeous. It's heavy, but it's gorgeous. It is for sale in the gift shop. Todd will be around for a book signing. So at this point, thank you all for coming, but please stick around, go to the book signing, buy a book, talk with Todd, enjoy the drinks and food out in the lobby, and by all means, take your time and stroll through the exhibition. It is also beautiful. Thank you very much.